Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'll be sharing a couple cards I made using Spellbinders February 2022 Large Die of the Month kit. I've already shared a video using their card and embossing folder kit, and I will link that at the end of this video and also in the description box below. The theme for the Large Die of the Month is typing class. So here's a look at all of the dies that are included. There is one more die, it's the outline for the sentiments, and I'll show that here in a moment. I just forgot to put it back on the magnetic sheet. And just so you know, the magnets are not included with the kit. This is just how I like to store my dies. For pattern paper on my cards, I'll be using Graphic 45's Elegance collection. This is an older collection. I believe it was released either last year or the year before. I will have a link in the description box below. So let's go ahead and get started with card number 1. I used one of the pattern papers to cut out the body of the typewriter. I really like that vintage look. Then I have some red cardstock that I use for the background behind all of the keys. And here are all of the little die cuts I'll be adding to the card. So lots of pretty florals, but right now I'll be focusing on the keys of the typewriter. I cut them out from some gold mirror cardstock. On the back side of that red piece, I put some double-sided tape so I can easily just inlay all of those teeny tiny typewriter keys. I'm using some reverse tweezers to pick up those tiny pieces and then inlay them into that background red die cut. And I have sped up some portions of this video quite a bit. So now I'll remove the release paper on the back side and attach this to the front of the typewriter. Before, I don't think it really looked like a typewriter, but once you attach the keys, it's really starting to take shape. You could leave the keys just like that, how I have them with the gold, but if you want to add that extra detail, there's also a die that'll cut out the teeny tiny oval to glue on the very top of those gold keys. So I'm putting just a tiny bit of liquid adhesive, and this time I'm using an embellishment wand to pick these up since they are so tiny. Since I am using liquid adhesive, there is that little bit of wiggle room so you can get everything adjusted. And I like to use the back end of the embellishment wand to push those in place. That way I don't get quite as much glue on my fingertips and make a big mess on my card. Once I have all of the keys in place, I'll attach the space bar. I use some off-white pearlescent cardstock for that. I'll just glue that in place with some liquid adhesive. There are two different dies to assemble. It's either the roller knob, I think that's what it's called, or the carriage return. Some of the samples I've seen have one on each side and others just have one on the right side. For my typewriter, I decided to put one on both sides. I used some gold specialty cardstock for the main piece and then added a piece of black so it looks like a shadow. To attach those to the back of the typewriter, I'm using some double-sided tape, just a small piece. I'll remove the release paper, flip over the typewriter, and then line up those roller knobs or carriage return, whatever those pieces are. I made sure to get them nice and straight so it looks like it's all one piece just on the back side. For the background of my card, since there's so much going on, I decided to just go with a plain cardstock. Although this does have a pearlescent finish. This is an off-white pearlescent cardstock. I have some white cardstock that I'll add into the typewriter for the paper. Decided to round those top two corners. And then just to hold it in place right now, I'm putting some double-sided tape on the back side. Next, I'll add some foam dimension all on the back side so I can pop this up. Removing the release paper on that double-sided tape first. So this is just a regular Scotch foam dimension. It's a little bit thicker than the thin foam squares that I love to use, but I decided for this card it's okay to have that extra dimension. Plus, I can purchase the Scotch foam dimension in a big roll, and it usually lasts me close to a year. I did cut some teeny tiny pieces to put behind those little knobs. Before adhering the typewriter to the card, I decided to work on the sentiment. So I've already used one of the dies to cut out thanks. And then here is the die that I forgot to include at the very beginning. It's the outline to go around the sentiment. So you can see how it cuts out that perfect border. I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it to the top of the paper in the typewriter. And I just used some solid black cardstock for the sentiment. Once the sentiment is in place, I'll flip over the typewriter and remove all the release paper. So this is a very large die for an A2 size card. It probably would fit a little bit better on a 5x7, but it does still work for an A2 size. It just goes all the way to the edge. I'm leaving about 1/4 of an inch at the very bottom of the card. That way the base of the typewriter isn't sitting on the edge. Now it's time to assemble the beautiful flowers. There are 3 different styles of flowers. This yellow is the medium size, and there's the 2 pieces to assemble together. I just used some yellow cardstock for that flower. For the largest flower, I chose one of the pattern papers, and then I also have the same red that I used on the typewriter. And then there's the teeny tiny flower. I used that gold yellow cardstock and then the red for the center. One of the dies included has the stem for the flowers, and it has 2 different ends. So you could leave it all as one piece or cut it in half. So I'm cutting mine in half. Just glue those to the end of the larger flowers. Then there's several different leaf dies. There's 2 that are really small, and that's what I'm using behind this smallest daisy flower. And then there's some leafy branches. Now since I've already attached my typewriter, I don't really have any room at the top to really tuck those branches in, so I am trimming these down and just putting liquid adhesive on the back. And some of those areas that I trimmed off the bottom, I'll still use them, I'll just tuck them around. I want to have this beautiful bouquet of flowers peeking up from behind the typewriter. So once all those leaves are in place, I can add the flowers. And I did put some thin foam dimension on the very top of those large red flowers. So there's some areas I tried to tuck them in, they just didn't want to go, so I had to trim that stem down just a little bit more. I have 2 of the red flowers, 3 of the medium yellow, and then 3 of the smallest yellow daisy. I tucked one of the yellow flowers behind the red flower, put another yellow flower in front, and then this very final yellow flower, I'll tuck it over on the left side. I am popping up 2 of those small daisies using some thin foam squares that I had to cut super small. Now I'm just adding some of those extra leaves that I cut off from the bottom. For the very final flower that has the leaves behind it, I'll attach that to the left side of the typewriter. To finish off the card, I'll use some of Spellbinders Bling. This is their gold mix gems. I'll put 3 of them underneath the sentiment. So I'm trying to add the first one to make sure it's centered, then I can add the other 2. I'm also using a glitter brush and adding it to the red portion on the large flower and also the center of the small yellow flowers. And for a little bit of shine, I'll top off the center of the tiny flowers with some glossy accents. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design, although you can see they're not exactly the same. For the first card I made, I felt I had too much of the paper sticking out of the typewriter, so I made sure to trim that down a little bit for the card I recorded. Now moving on to card number 2. The background paper is from the same Graphic 45 collection. I love this black and white grid background. It looks like a fun tile floor. Since you already watched me assemble one of the typewriters, I've already put this second one together. This time using just solid cardstock. So a couple different pinks. I have black for the top of the keys. And then for the space bar, I did use some pearlescent white cardstock. I'll be making a horizontal card this time. I have some of the palm leaves cut out of a mint green cardstock. I glued one of them down on the right side, and that'll be underneath the typewriter. I've put foam dimension on the back of the typewriter, and I've added my piece of paper, just a very small piece this time. It'll just hold one of the sentiments. So I'll attach that to the card, and I will have the typewriter at an angle. And I did forget to put a strip of foam dimension underneath the paper, so luckily I was able to lift that up and tuck it in there. For the sentiment on the card, I'll be adding happy to the paper that's in the typewriter, and also the word birthday, and that will go in that blank area on the pink portion of the typewriter. At the top of the typewriter, it's probably hard to see in the video, but there is a slightly embossed area so you can line up a sentiment there. Just using some liquid adhesive and my reverse tweezers. So now I have a happy birthday sentiment. Now I did put double-sided tape on the back side of the paper and the typewriter, but it does still leave that gap on the front side of the card, so you're able to tuck in some leaves or flowers if you want. I won't be adding as many leaves and flowers to this card, but I decided to add one of the palm leaves in the upper left-hand corner, a little leafy branch also, and I did tuck those in. I'm using one of the large flowers, and I cut that out from some rose gold satinere cardstock, so it has a really pretty shine. And I used that same cardstock for those tiny daisy flowers. I'll put one of the daisies next to the sentiment birthday. I'll put a few more of the branches behind this larger flower. I used some white pearlescent cardstock for that lower piece of the large flower. Add a little daisy on top. Then to finish up the card, I'm adding some more of the gems from Spellbinders, this time the silver mix color. I'll put one in the center of the daisies. These do have adhesive on the back, but since I'm attaching them to a specialty cardstock, I'm also putting a drop of liquid adhesive. I'll put a few more of the gem stickers around the leaf area. So there is my finished card, and I did make two. I love how this one turned out. I think the contrast from the black and white background in that soft pink typewriter looks so pretty. And I know it's not a surprise to anybody, but I couldn't resist making a pink typewriter. Now here's another look at the 4 cards I made using Spellbinders February 2022 Large Die of the Month. If you are interested in subscribing, I do have links provided in the description box below. In order to receive this die set, you do need to subscribe by February 24th. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.